Holy happy hour, Batman. I am Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest, co-founder of the All Ports Open Network, and on this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I'm joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, game design philosophy, and literally whatever else comes up. So this show is a production of allportsopen.com, a collaboration of creative people who think deeply about play. APON was founded as a place where people of all worldviews, beliefs, and identities could enjoy and contemplate what it means to play together. You can check out our great lineup of shows at allportsopen.com. Don't forget that Monday nights, which this is, our network has back-to-back TTRPG content on Mondays. So there's my show here at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then after this stream, so tonight, we're going to raid into, that's a Twitch term, if you're watching us on Twitch, we're going to raid into the Monday night show over on the Worst Days channel. They're going to be playtesting a brand new upcoming horror game from APON Games titled A Long Night's Ride into Darkness. So I'm really excited about this game. It's brand new. I think it's the first playtest ever, but it's a group of 2 to 5 travelers rides from the New England town of Millgrove to the old village of Beecher's Bluffs. The road between the two towns is perilous. Many have traveled this path before, and they tell tales of the terrors that others have faced along the way. Whether on horseback, in wagons, on motorcycles, or bikes, the open air teases from travelers the need to stop along the way and note the strange landmarks and the stories that they elicit. A Long Night's Ride into Darkness is a game about telling scary and disturbing stories. So if you like narrative-heavy role-playing games and horror role-playing games, which I have a feeling maybe if you're watching tonight's episode of Holy Happy Hour that you might like those things, then stick around at 9 p.m. or come back at 9 p.m. or whatever, and check it out. Check out the playtest. So one more piece of housekeeping. A brand new episode of my Masks Actual Play podcast, Delinquent Comics, launched today. Guest GM Caleb Sunstead took our heroes through a harrowing tale of action and danger in our 2-part special issue, The Death of Burnout. So part 2 is out today. Check it out wherever podcasts are found. On this episode tonight of Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am thrilled to be joined by one of my heroes of the gaming and geek world, co-designer of the game Apocalypse World, founder of Powered by the Apocalypse System, designer of a myriad of other fabulous and influential role-playing games, game design philosopher, educator, activist, Meg Baker is with us tonight. We're going to bring Meg forward in just a moment. I might have tricked her into thinking she's being brought on now, because that sounded like I was doing that. But before I bring Meg forward, I am going to tell you about this drink. So you see it on your screen now, Murderous Green Ghost, obviously inspired by Murderous Ghosts, which is I'm sure we're going to talk about. Fabulous game. And so you can see what's in it. It is an alcohol-free beverage, perfect for the spooky season. We've got a mix of tangerine juice and orange juice and lime juice, and it's my attempt to create Ecto Cooler, basically. You add simple syrup to make it sweet, because it needs to be sweeter, green food coloring to get that bright green flavor. And then what I did and what I recommend doing is like you shake it up with ice, pour it into a glass, and then use like a droplet thing to like drop in grenadine, or maybe like cinnamon syrup would work too, because I kind of like the flavor of the cinnamon syrup, and like drop them in so there's like blood drops in like the green ghost. So that's the drink, Murderous Green Ghost. My rule as always is if you make one of the drinks that I make on the show, you have to tell us about it. You have to let us know. All right. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring Meg Baker on the show. Meg, welcome to Holy Happy Hour, Batman.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here. This is delightful. If I'd had that recipe beforehand, I would have made one.
Oh, I should have sent it to you. It didn't. I've actually literally never sent the drink recipe to the guest beforehand, and I don't know why. I just never thought to do it.
Oh,
just never really occurred to
future times.
There you go. Exactly. How are you?
I'm good. Today was a good day.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad to hear it. Murderous Ghosts. So I, probably not the game that you're most famous for, though it's a fabulous game. And it is a game. So it has a special place in my heart because I run a Saturday night game group. Actually out of our church. It's a ministry of my congregation, but it's not like a religious event, and lots of people from all kinds of backgrounds come to it. And before the pandemic, we had a big Halloween party every year, and I think it was the last one we did. We had like basically filled the church up with like, I don't know, it must have been 30 plus people there,
Great.
like mostly in costume, played a gigantic group game of Murderous Ghosts.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great size for it too. 30 people. It's great. That's a
It
really
was
good size.
so fun. Oh my gosh, it was really just like one of my favorite memories of SNS, if not the most, like my top memory of SNS. And it was a blast. So yeah, I'm curious, like where did the idea for Murderous Ghosts come from? Like that's such an interesting. Oh, and maybe you can give
Oh,
a quick description of the game for people who are watching who have no idea what I'm talking about.
sure. Murderous Ghosts is a party game for uh, a group of people who want to hang out and tell a spooky ghost story together. And when we originally designed it, it was originally designed as a two-player game in the manner of a lot of the sort of old my booklet versus your booklet game. The one we played a lot, Vincent and I played a lot, was lightsaber dueling, where one of us is Luke Skywalker and the other one is Darth Vader. And it's like, I do this move, you only do green and blue moves next turn. So that's a bit of a choose your own adventure and a bit of a back and forth between each other with these constraints around it. So it structures the story. And then there's some interesting history around Murderous Ghosts about like games that are scary and games that are dangerous and is it okay to play games that are like scary, where you are scared in the game? And so there's some like other deeper game theory there that we're playing with in that game, specifically around, like for me, an underlying place is consent, always consent and agency of the player.
Yeah.
And so if you are signing up to be scared, great, I am here to try and give you a scary time. But if you don't want to be scared, then there's always that thing of like, just skip to the end and don't worry about it. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there in Murderous Ghosts, but we originally designed it as a two-player game, and then I saw Jared Sorensen run Action Castle. He had laryngitis, so he ran it totally silently, and this game was astonishing for like 400 people. And I after like catching a tiny bit of that and hearing more about it later, I told Vincent, like, okay, this changes to a party game. This is not a two-player game. This is a group participation party game. And then we rewrote it, and I've run it for groups from like 6 to 400. I think our biggest group was 400 people.
Wow.
I love it. It's so much fun.
I missed you run it at PAX Unplugged. I guess the last one that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ask for us. I mean, I will happily run it again. I will offer it all the time because I love running this game. It's so much fun. And yeah, that's great that you even like remember that it ran.
Oh yeah,
there.
no, 100%. So the day that PAX, so Blaine Martin, who's one of my close friends, and he may be watching the stream right now, so if he might comment on, we were at PAX Unplugged together, and he we always go over our agenda, like what are we going to go to, who are we going to see, and he can go all the way to the end of like the last panel for something like you like Meg Baker's running Murderous Ghosts, like, and I have to tap out at that point, like it's like it was just too late, like I was just too exhausted.
I think I wound up running 2 games of Murderous Ghosts at PAX Unplugged in 2019 because there was one on the books, and then there were a couple people who were like, oh, I really wanted to play it and I didn't get to, and I was like, oh, whatever. And I wound up running this tiny little game of like for these 2 people who would, people I knew I was going to see there, and whatever. And we just sort of grabbed some other random people, and I ran this game of Murderous Ghosts for like 8 people in a sort of like odd little place of like the top of the stairs over there. Yeah, it was really fun.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I feel like PAX is not complete without one of those giant group games. Like since I saw Action Castle there, like at PAX East, many years before that, or I guess a number of years before that, and then like, and I feel like that's part of PAX now. I don't know why. Something about that experience.
It's a different experience, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you can correlate it with is a congregational experience. You know, there's a difference between having small group ministry and having a one-on-one thing, or having like big, you know, there's something neat to having that revival experience, you know, of like, let's just get everybody in the room, you know. It's kind of a neat thing, you know, even if it's a different type of experience than just the four of us sitting at the table. And having that breadth of different types of experience, I think, is really, really good for us as human beings. It gives us more ways to recognize our interconnection with other people, which is good. I feel like this doesn't quite answer the question, though. You had a question about Murderous Ghosts at the beginning.
Oh, well, it was like what inspired. No, I think you did answer it.
What inspired?
What inspired you?
Yeah.
You know, to make it. I think you did.
Yeah. So what inspired it was like wanting to play with the format, and wanting to, you know, just do things that were sort of more structured. You know, choose your own adventure-y.
Yeah.
But that told stories and played with core loop mechanics of like, these are the core loops in the game. Yeah, it was really fun.
When I was thinking about it a little bit earlier, when I was designing that drink, it sort of just struck me like how intense, like for a ghost story, it's a murderous ghost story. And like, I don't know why it struck me in a new way earlier thinking about it, just like the sort of the violence of that, the sort of like intensity of that. It's really intense. And so it's interesting that you talk about the safety aspect of that. And I'm curious about sort of the balance, right? Because you heard me say we're playtesting a new horror game after this show, or I'm not in the playtest, but a new Apon Games horror game. And you know, so thinking about that idea of like, how do you build safety into something that's meant to be horrifying?
Meant to be horrifying. I mean, the real thing for that is, I think, that you recognize each other's agency throughout, and you give the players and the characters options and agency where they can exercise their effect on the world. If you make people helpless, that's more horrifying. You know, if everybody always has the option to say, okay, hold on, let's do that bit over. That was too weird. That went in a weird way. Let's go a different way. Or if every character has a play of like, okay, here is a way I can take action in this scene. Here's a way I can do something, because that's what's most horrifying to us, is a lack of ability to do anything. You know, as long as we have the capacity mentally, emotionally, spiritually to take any action, physically to take any action, we can find our way out of horror. It's when we have no way out, you know, that we're really trapped by whatever is trapping us in like whatever our conception is that is trapping us in that horrifying space. That's the hard part. And then that there's a whole design questions there of like how you create agency, how you design for agency, how you design for consent, and like how do you help support each player in fully playing their own character, and how do you help support the players to not sort of step on other people's characters, because none of us like either the thing of like, oh, and then you do this. Like, don't tell me what I do. I want to have my own agency. And so that's a really interesting thing to wrestle with. And it's something I have to wrestle with as a game designer. It's like, how do I give my players enough constraints to make it an interesting conversation, and give them enough agency to give them active, continual consent to be there and take part in that conversation.
Yeah, it's so interesting here you talk about this about Murderous Ghosts, because what you were just describing sounded also like Powered by the Apocalypse, or like Apocalypse, like, which I get why, but like it's really interesting because that philosophy of conversation.
I mean, Murderous Ghosts is definitely Powered by the Apocalypse. You know, it's in we have a little suite of like PBTA eye openers that are games that Vincent and I have designed that sort of push at the edges, that people don't necessarily think of as being PBTA, but they are. And Murderous Ghosts is definitely part of that, for that reason. Like, we're playing with what are your options here? What can you make of this situation? How can you move and how can you not move? And what are you going to do? What are you going to pick from this list of options that you can do?
I would not have thought of Murderous Ghosts as powered by the apocalypse. And so now that makes me want to ask you, like, would you say powered by apocalypse? Makes me wonder what it means to be powered by the apocalypse. Is it more about the design philosophy behind it than it is any structural mechanisms? Yes. That's amazing. Can you say more, can you say something about that? More about that?
Sure. We have on the Apocalypse World website, we have a whole like open letter about this and about what is PBTA, what it means. But that's a little bit more like what it means to have powered by the apocalypse on your game.
Right.
And we lay out very clearly that is, if you are inspired by our work in Apocalypse World and you feel as though that has helped be part of the toolbox and the creative engine, allowing you to get your work out into the world, and you want to, and then you feel like saying this is powered by the apocalypse, you are right. And then you can email us and talk to us about like logos and names and things. There's a lot of people who want to look at like, oh, well, it's got to have playbooks and it's got to have basic moves and it's got to use 2d6 and it's got to have an MC as like these things that it must have to be powered by the apocalypse. And that's no, it's very much like a toolbox, right? We figured out a bunch of tools for game design and we put them in Apocalypse World, and that's like the Metal Shop toolbox kit. And then we wrote Under Hollow Hills, which has just come out, and in that it's very, there's a lot of different things going on, and I talk about that a little bit, like, okay, that's wood shop, different tools, they do different things. There's a hammer in each one, but they're different, and so powered by the apocalypse is just if you use those tools to make your thing happen.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought, I was not necessarily, like, I didn't necessarily prep this question, but it seems like an obvious one though, which is something I had not thought about, which is, when you did Apocalypse World and then Powered by the Apocalypse, was Powered by the Apocalypse always in the intention? Like, were you always intending to do PBTA along with it? Oh, okay, I wasn't sure if maybe like the need for
from
it.
the beginning. Yeah, from the beginning, like we were lucky in a way, right? Because it's like that place of feeling like we'd figured out some stuff that we thought like, hey, this could be useful to people. And then right away, practically the day that Apocalypse World was like out in the very first, like, hey, friends and fellow game designers. I mean, I don't think it was even published yet. It was just like talking about it with friends. But like as soon as it made an appearance, John Harper was working on Blades of the Dark, and Avery was working on Monster Hearts, and Michael was working on Monster of the Week, and Sage was working on Dungeon World, like right away. And so that was when I was like, we were like, okay, Vincent was saying like, it's Apocalypse, the Apocalypse World engine was the construction that was in that group of people. And we were talking about it like, you think of the mechanics of a game and that implies an engine, because mechanics and engines go together. And like, but that's a little bit, the Apocalypse World engine. I'm like, no, it's powered by the apocalypse. And then I was like, yes. And that was that.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. And so I would say that at the beginning, like as we were writing it ourselves, we had an inkling and a hope that these would be useful tools for other people. And then we're extremely, extremely grateful that they have been. Right off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you are shocked at all by the size. It keeps growing to sizes that I'm surprised that, like, Avatar surprised me. Not,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
interesting, right? It's
yeah.
yeah.
It's I don't I don't know. Like our intention in identifying and creating a toolbox that we figured would be useful, like our intention there was more voices that hadn't been heard from before, non-dominant voices, people of color, women, queer folks, people who were previously incarcerated, people who are currently poor, people who are struggling in different ways, and to have the work that we did mean that there's anybody out there who can breathe a little easier at the grocery store because they've put some piece of Powered by the Apocalypse out into the world, or like podcasts or dice or whatever they're doing, maps, I don't know, whatever they're doing, that Powered by the Apocalypse has been a way for them to help have more agency and comfort in the world is good.
Yeah. Well, we got some questions in the chat that were kind of jumping back a little bit too, because
Yeah, go for it.
because our conversation kept going naturally, but somebody did ask
all good.
about Murderous Ghosts, with the idea of using just text to play Murderous Ghosts, like Slack, Discord, text message, like, whether that you think that would work for.
The issue with that is the cards. You'd need something to handle the cards. If you could find an app that would handle card flips effectively, go for it. Try it. I think that'd be great. Because the way, I mean, you could use blackjack, but the problem is in blackjack you bust on a 21, and in Murderous Ghost you bust on 20. So it's not a perfect thing you'd want. It's something you could customize. I am sure that you can customize it out there, but that's the only constraint, is you'd need to figure out a way to have a deck of cards that you could flip through digitally, which I'm sure exists, and then go for it. Definitely try that. Let me know how it goes.
I mean, there's something like Tabletop Simulator, but there's got to be way less bulky ways to flip through a deck of cards on the internet. There's probably probably a very simple website that does it. And then the other, this is more of a comment than a question, but someone said, I've always considered Cyrun PBTA, but I've been seeing people refer to it as another system lately. And then Other Kind, I guess, is the other system.
Yeah, absolutely. The Other Kind system is something that Vincent and myself and Emily Care-Boss came up with in the late 90s. Our son Elliot is 21, and we were developing it just before he was born, so late 90s. Or maybe into 2000. The Other Kind system of dice has that, like, a chart where you have to assign, your dice. You roll some dice and make a dice pool, and then you assign them.
Is Romance Trilogy Other Kind system? No,
I don't think so. I frankly would have to go back and look, but I don't think so. The Other Kind is something that, like, Vincent and I designed, and then Emily was playing an Ars Magica game with us, in which we tested it extensively through that game for different scenarios. And I definitely think she has some credit and input there. But I honestly, to be honest, I'd have to go back and look at Breaking the Ice. I don't think that that's Another Kind mechanic, but I couldn't swear to it. And if I'm wrong, please forgive me, Emily.
I just know it's similar to what I mean, I haven't played The Other Kind, but what you're describing about creating pools of dice and assigning it to different, I mean, it's similar to that in Romance. In some of the Romance Trilogy games.
Yeah, I haven't played any of the romance games in a very long time.
So we really jumped. I was gonna say, a lot of times I will basically try to get someone's, like, a backstory, so to speak, like like
Oh, okay.
someone's origin story is what I was looking for. But we really just jumped right into all of this, which is great. But for folks who may not know that much about you, like yeah, let's do your origin story basically. Like I did say who you are, but just sort of like who you are, where you come from. Like what's your it could be your TTRPG origin story, it could just be your life origin story.
Wow. I mean, we could. How long do you want this podcast to
We
go?
got an hour, so
All right. So that means okay. We have an hour from now.
an hour from now.
Okay. All right. How to sum up? This is tough. This is a hard question.
I asked it in a hard way. I can ask a very specific question.
No. Okay. Go for this specific question, and then I'll circle back to the hard one.
No, it's just, when did you start playing? Okay.
I was 7 years old, and I was 7 years old. Let's see. My stepfather was deployed in the Navy, and I was living with my mother and my younger sister in upstate New York, which is where I was born and raised, in like Cooperstown area. If anybody out there is a baseball fan, you know what that means. And our next door neighbor, their older brother got a copy of the red box basic set D&D, and Aaron did not care at all. I was 7, Jono was 9, Jenny was 10. Jenny was like, we are playing this now forever. So we did. And from the time I was 7 until the time I was 20, I guess, there were 2 years that I wasn't actively involved in role playing. And both of them, I moved across country to California when I was 12, and it took me a year to sort of find people to play games with again. And then I moved back from California back to Massachusetts to go to college, and it took me a year to find people to play role-playing games with again. But other than that, up until the time I had kids, and even still, I'm 50 years old, and there have been 2 years in my life since I was 7 that I've not been actively involved in role-playing game design or running or playing or writing or publishing in some way. So yeah, that's my whole life.
Yeah, that's it. That's all of it right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's that piece. But like,
Right,
if you
of
look at the
course.
backstory,
Yeah.
and specific to the, to your podcast, my mom was raised fundamentalist Baptist and had a very dramatic exit from the church when she was about 16. She had a preacher confess to impropriety with a parishioner from the pulpit. And then she had another very beloved youth leader die from a brain aneurysm.
Oh my gosh.
So just like, that's enough to make you question some things.
Yeah.
I remember very, very clearly being, let's see, what grade? I was 6, year before I started playing D&D. I remember very clearly my mom getting ready to go to church again for the first time. I was 6 years old. And she was just acting so weird. She was like just being kind of strange around the house. And I'm like, Mom, what is wrong? And she said, well, what if I go and I like it? And I said, we'll go back. And my mom is now a Unitarian Universalist minister and has been for the past 20 years. She was a youth minister my whole, once I hit double digits. So she was a youth minister and she was church administrator and all those things. And so going from basically some sort of Scandinavian, Swedish, nature-based stuff, because my great-grandfather was Swedish, a Swedish immigrant, and we were very close with him. So going from that and like learning every myth system I could. My mom was very, very emphatic about exposing me to as many different cultural belief systems as possible. She'd gone back to college. She was very involved in like, broader student life. Like anytime there was like, oh, this group of students is putting on a thing, or, there's going to be a, Balinese dancers or this or that, like museums, everything. We were there all the time because she was trying to give us a bigger world than she'd have.
Yeah.
And also in order to give me specifically a buffer zone against my mother's real extremism at the time, which worked because then when I was introduced to Christianity at 5, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is another myth system and I want to know all about it. And my poor grandmother, who is now, life has been very kind to her and she is in a different place. But so I encountered Unitarian Universalism and Sufism within the same 3-month period when I was years old. And that was it for me. And so those things happen really close together, an organized way in which to play pretend with my friends, starting with D&D, and give a framework and a structure to all of the pretend that we were doing anyway. Unitarian Universalism that like has the shared heresies of there being a divine force who is too tender of the universe to condemn anyone to hell. That's Unitarianism and universal salvation. And Sufism, which Ruhaniat Sufism, the American branch of Sufism, is like really we just want to like dance together and like share food and sing and have that be embodied prayer and like walk around outside and do stuff to make the world better. And that's like where my whole spiritual stuff is. And you can see those braid through my work, that in my work in gaming about like we are all connected and it's all about the conversation. It's all about how we interconnect and how we are together, and that we must be in consent, even if we're doing things where our characters are really at odds. We as people have to be working in accord. And then the other piece of that is that I'm a sex ed teacher, and my mom was, the earliest volunteer work I did was folding pamphlets for Planned Parenthood, because my mom was in the 70s in rural upstate New York doing door-to-door service. Like, hi, I'm here from Planned Parenthood. Would you like to hear about it? She had guns pulled on her. She had dogs set on her. She's a single woman in the 70s going all, and I'm like, you are just phenomenally amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's like my whole, now you have it in a nutshell. All that, 2 cross-country moves, stepfather who was in the Navy, and I met Vincent on Vincent's first day at Hampshire College, and I was like, done. Yes. Good.
You seem to be, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but you seem to be the kind of person that what you just described about meeting Vincent, like, okay, yeah, they're boom, done, and now I can keep going. Like, that seems to be how all these things, right? You encountered role playing at 7 years old, boom, life set.
We're good.
I'm good. I encountered, the form of Sufism as a child. Boom, I'm good. 40 years, I'm set. I'm set. It just seems to be naturally how you interact with things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to temper my nature, which is my nature is enthusiastic, and I want to find out about everybody. I'm like, tell me about yourself. You're fascinating. Like, I want to know all about you. Like, before the stream, I'm like, oh, and how old are your kids? And what are you doing? And how's things? Like, because I find people endlessly fascinating. And I feel like everyone has stories worth hearing and wisdom to share. And it doesn't matter who they are, how old they are, or where they're at in life. And so I have a great enthusiasm for that. And I also think a lot of the stuff from my early life that was very challenging. My stepfather was severely alcoholic. I dealt with my mom had gone back to college, which meant we were living on student loans, and we were like dirt poor, like really poor. Like I remember the year that I was in third grade and the pipes froze in the winter, and we're like, oh, we have no plumbing, and it's January. I was homeless briefly in eighth grade, because that was when the marriage to my stepfather, my mom's marriage to my stepfather, fell apart, and because of the alcoholism. And we're like, well, this is what happens. Like my willingness to seize the good, to recognize the good and to seize the good, is in a sort of fervent rejection of badness, right? Because we all live with two parallel truths, the parallel truths of our life, and every single one of us can tell a true story about our lives of like how wonderful this was. We're alive on the planet, how amazing this was, like who in our childhood loved us and sustained us, and like things that happened that were great, that helped shape us, even the hardships that shaped us. And we can also tell a truth that is just deprivation and loss and just terrible things that have happened to us. That because that's life, those are simultaneously true things. And it's so challenging to hold that simultaneous truth and to hold that paradox that those are both true. But when I do that, I'm looking toward the one that's like, all right, let's try to value more or pay attention to more. We're not ignoring this, but we're going to pay attention to the wonders in life,
Yeah. I mean, it could be, I think, so easy to experience a lot of hardship in life and have really hard and even horrible things happen, to a person. It could be, it could to then have that, like you could have that, and it could shape you into being a person that sees the world through that lens of like, well, the world is a hard place that hurts people, and that's what it is. That's the world. So to experience hardship and to like choose to see goodness, it's like, I think, such a profound like choice to live by. Like, I'm going to choose to see good, and make good and live for good in the world. Like you're talking about your mom going door to door with Planned Parenthood stuff, like
in
after
the 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Roe v. Wade was passed in 72 and she was doing this in like 76. Why?
Yeah, so like, to not even but the choice to tell the story, the way you're going to tell the story, that's interesting to me. The idea of like how I'm going to choose to tell my story this way. It seems like a really profound, like, I don't know if it's like what the word is for what it is. It's sort of an existential action. It's like a deliberate choice. Yeah.
It's an underlying place. So in Ruhaniat Sufism, the baseline for that, there's like, it is to increase the love, harmony, and beauty in the world. Like that is my every morning. When I'm like, what am I here to do? I'm here to try to expand, love, harmony, and beauty in the world. And the part that my teachers bring to that also is that means that's an arrow that points toward justice. That isn't just like, oh, it's gonna be beautiful. It's like, if I am truly working to increase love and harmony and beauty in the world, that points me inexorably toward justice, and towards none of us are free till all of us are free, and actual work in the world to stand up and help as I am able, and that's a solid place to wake up every morning. Like, this is why I'm here. I'm not always great at it. Some mornings I wake up and I'm like, oh God, oh,
Of course, yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
But it always helps if I can remember, this is why I'm here. This is my purpose. And that, that leads me to say yes a lot. I mean, that leads me to being on this podcast, frankly, because having people say, hey, do you want to do a thing? And I learned in my life that, yes, I want to do things. And to say yes is like when I can. And another whole piece of my life is I work, I say I meddle in the affairs of the dead for the benefit of the living, because I work in history museums. And
I'm sorry. That's amazing. And it just, it took a second and it struck me. I'm sorry. That's incredible.
I mean, it makes me sound like a necromancer, and that's kind of okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
But it's that, I'm interested in the stories, and I want to connect people, and I want to connect things, and that's all part of the whole thing. I want to find out about people, and I'm interested in them. That lets me get up in the morning and be like, all right, what are we doing today?
So I've always sort of heard Sufism is described as being like the mystical Islam, like mystical branch of Islam. But then you describe it, it sounds so like action and justice oriented. And
both are true.
Yeah, I was gonna say that not that they're necessarily at odds with each other.
Yeah.
But can you tell us more about the, and I don't want to mispronounce it.
Ruhaniat.
Ruhaniat.
Yeah. There's lots of different streams of Islam, and of Sufism in particular. There's there's different streams of Sufism, and the one that is my particular line is Hazrat Inayat Khan, who was a musician and mystic Sufi, came over from India in the late 1800s. I'd have like 1890 something. I'd have to get the exact dates. I don't have them. See, because this is the thing, and this is where it's like, but you don't know. So much of the focus is on the being in the world. It's like we learn from everywhere. Like Hazrat Inayat Khan brought Sufism and music to America, to the Bay Area in San Francisco, and played all over the country, but most, like, that was where I was. And in the like 40s and 50s and 60s, and Samuel Lewis really latched on to that. Like, there were some people who were like, oh, this, and like Ruth St. Denis is in that, and like people who were in that sort of post-World War II understanding that the world was much bigger than they had previously thought, like much more complex, and we were much more interconnected. We'd just been through this world war. We were trying to recover our equilibrium after the trauma of war, and turning to spirituality in many different ways, in many different paths of spirituality, to try and figure out how to make sense of this. And we had whole, like, so much impact of the war. And then you have this person who shows up, and it's like, it's about music. It's music, and it is dance, and it is prayer as an embodied thing that you do, as opposed to just like an act. It's like you're prayerful in your everyday, in your every breath. It really, like, it took off because it matched up with, like, as it came into the 60s and 70s, it matched up with a lot of other types of thought going on, like the whole hippie movement, some of the end of the beatnik movement, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, the ERA, like all of these things meshed. The whole power of folk music to change things, and that singing together, which was which has, our entire human history is singing together. Our entire, like, that's how we like measure time. That's how like have we wound enough string on the to get the sail up or whatever. And it became a radical and disruptive act in the 60s, like to sing together in a public place. That and it has a huge long history in labor movements and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Whatever. So that's where Sufism, the Ruhaniat Sufism, comes from. You can look it up online. There's more things, but I definitely say it's like the Quaker. Sufism is to, Ruhaniat Sufism especially is to like the rest of Islam, as like Quakers are to mainstream other branches of Christianity. I don't know.
That's an interesting That's interesting, yeah, and it makes sense to me. Like it totally tracks me. I was going to ask you about commonalities between Sufism and other versions of Islam. Like, are there what the commonalities are? Like, what kinds of
I mean, there definitely are, but you may as well ask, Episcopalians and Lutherans and Methodists and Catholics what the commonalities are. And like some of them
I do get asked that a lot, though, I will say. I do get asked that a lot.
And like some people in every one of those branches of Christianity will say, oh, here's how we're all the same. And some people in every branch will be like, oh, we're nothing like them.
Right.
Same goes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the same goes. I mean, obviously the underlying one is the concept of Allah as, a universal, there is one God.
One, right. The oneness. Yeah.
One God. But it's interesting to me, in my Ruhaniat Sufism, that the one God is also woven through the Unitarian Universalism, where universality, this is not a like there is only one, it is that the oneness that is God, the oneness of it.
So it's about unity, right?
Very different. Yeah. And the la ilaha illallah is that there is nothing that is not God. That everything is within the existence of God, and that's common. But even that, it's a different slant than you might find from a Sunni or Shia or different, or even different Sufis, because Sufis all over the world. And then Subhanallah. The Subhanallah is the recognizing that I am not God, and there are people for whom the Subhanallah is like a surrender. Like we make ourselves, we are not God. I'm so much lesser. But for me, it's also like I cannot take on me the burdens that aren't mine. Everything is God. I am not God. I can do my little part to make the world more just, more beautiful, more loving, and more kind. But I'm not God, and so I have to let that be God's. And then alhamdulillah is the gratitude of and that's my every morning. La ilaha illallah, subhanallah, alhamdulillah. And alhamdulillah is like, it gives me gratitude. It fills me with joy every time, because it is just the embodied feeling of gratitude. I'm alive. Oh my God. I have 2 electric lights on in a house where I am warm enough, and I have had a good dinner, and all my family is safe. Alhamdulillah. 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 Nothing is more sacred than that. I'm so grateful. All the troubles of the day, oh well. And this is far from game design, but that's what you
No. That's what the show is for. That's what Holy Happy Hour is for. It's so we can talk about this. I mean, like when I first started the show, so I first started the show is because I wanted to create a show, and the show has not, it's like all things do take on a life of their own, but I wanted to create a show where I could have game designers mostly come into the space, and we could talk about like what we're this kind of conversation we're having. Well, we're not really talking about game design. We're talking about like, well, maybe spirituality or religious practice or whatever. It could be lots of other things too. But with people in those spaces, because they do, and it always. So sometimes it happens. Sometimes we just talk about people's games, which is not bad. I said that in a way that my tone, I feel like, made that sound like that's lesser. Because it's not. Like that's good too. It's good too. It's just different. But I have always found whenever we have these conversations that this impacts game design. Like I could just straight up ask you, like, how do you see this aspect of your life, of who as part of who you are, impact your design? Like, how does being Sufi, having a UU background, how does that impact your game design?
Yeah. And like I have two questions first before I answer that.
Sure.
Like, I so want to have you on your own show because like I'm talking and I'm like, it's good stuff but I'm also like, I'm so legitimately curious of like, okay, what's your background and how did you wind up where you are?
So I have an idea that just popped into my head, and by no means obviously are you obligated to this, but what just popped into my head was I should do an anniversary episode at some point, like when this show is maybe a year old or something. You can come back and interview me on the show as my own.
I would love that. I would love
that as well. It would mean
That'd
the
be
world to me.
so much fun.
Okay, all right. Well, I will try to remember this for the future. That would be amazing. It would be an honor for me.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So you said 2 questions. Was that 1 or 2?
I think that was it.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that was it. All right. So the question about how all of that informs my game design. I don't think any game designer can be outside their own experience. Whatever you've experienced, that's what you're bringing to your game design. And someone asked me recently about like other PBTA games, and like, was there things that I'd seen in PBTA other games or like that I felt was like really new or different or unexpected or whatever. And I was like, yes, all the time. Because that's the point, right? You're gonna bring different things to your design. So what I bring from this, like, I just want to, in my design, I want people to have agency. I want them to feel able to tell the stories. I want them to connect with each other. And like, I want there to be something of beauty in it. There needs to be something of love, harmony, justice. Love, harmony, beauty, and justice. There has to be something there. In Apocalypse World, the question on the back of the book that's also at the heart of the game is, what do you make of what you have? If this is what you're left with, what do you make? And that is a question about love, harmony, and beauty, and justice. In Siron, it's about reassembling your memories. Like, how do you, like, figuring out, piecing yourself back together and remembering yourself and your own story. So it's kind of a short answer, but it's
okay. But can you speak about love? What did you say? Love, beauty, justice. I think there's a fourth one I'm forgetting.
Love, harmony, and beauty. So in the invocation of toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the master, the spirit of guidance. That's the equivalent for me of the Our Father. I am focusing toward the oneness of all things, toward the one, the perfection, which means like the ideal, the highest, the most, the most vibrant of love, harmony, and beauty. This is where we live, is in love, harmony, and beauty. The only being, and that's encompassing the entirety. It doesn't mean that there's one, it means that this is all there is. The only being, united, together, knit, interconnected with all the illuminated souls, which means everybody, everything that can join in this place to form the embodiment, the full physical, actual reality that we live in daily of the master. And again, in fact, like the master of like all of this, but now with a forward thinking, an action. We're with the embodiment of the master, able to do a thing. The spirit, and now we're back to the spirit, and now we have of guidance. So we have all this back and forth, the one and everything, and the physical and the master and spirit of guidance. Guidance. I'm looking for direction that will move me on this path toward the one. Love, harmony, and beauty. And that doing that leads to, and all of that means justice in action. But that's, yeah.
Do you see love, harmony, and beauty in Murderous Ghosts, a game like Murderous Ghosts?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I can't not. I couldn't make it if it wasn't not.
Yeah.
I literally have that as a like a directive from my teacher, my Rashid, to like from 10 years ago at least, be like, this is part of your work. This must be part of your work. And I'm like, yes, you are right, and it is. And so that's good. But in Murderous Ghosts, like the specifics of it in Murderous Ghosts, you're looking to, like in the process of it, you will figure out the secret of someone who has suffered such violence and such sorrow and such grief that they have become a murderous ghost. It's not just, ooh, spooky ghost. It's murderous ghost. It is violence and grief has happened in a horrific way, which you must face. And that, I believe, and it's what I see in running it, that having that acknowledgement that there is this violence and this grief makes the conversations afterward about addressing those injustices. If we're in the factory and we're in the bowels of the factory and the murderous ghost is like, something happening, there's some horrible murder happened there as a result of, workplace inequity, we're going to wind up talking about violence in the workplace. We're going to talk about what it means to have a living wage, what it means to have working conditions that are ethical. We're going to talk about safety in terms of like OSHA violations and things. Like all of these things thread through just by raising the question of how did this person who was a person become a murderous ghost of sorrow? And then the process of playing the game and like having agency and making the decisions, because some of the questions in the game are like, what did you most want to do? Who is most gonna miss you? These are questions that are about your heart. They're about like they're about your heart, they're about your spirit, they're about like how are you as an embodied human being in the world. So surprise.
I mean, I knew it was in there. I just really wanted, we get to hear you pull it out for us.
Yeah.
We did get some questions in the chat a little bit ago about, there's a whole bunch of conversation in the chat, but about your children. So I thought maybe before we actually get the question, thank you, Blake Ryan, for the question. Before I ask the specific question, do you want to tell us a little bit about your family and also like the band, right? The
Baker House Band.
Baker House Band. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So we have 3 kids. Faye is just turned 25. Elliot is 21, and Toby's about to be 16. And all of them play games, all of them write games.
Cool.
Patreon, we have a Patreon. We're all on that. If you sign up for it, you get all of our everything.
I'll link it in the show notes, by the way, for folks.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, continue.
No, it's cool. I wasn't sure. I'm like, I don't want to step on anything here. It's not good.
Oh, no, absolutely.
So it was gonna be impossible that they not play game. Like they're doomed.
Doomed.
They are doomed. I'm sorry. It's like if you grow up with parents who are veterinarians, you're more likely to be a veterinarian. You grew up with game designer parents and historians, whatever, you're doomed. It's the family curse. We literally call it the family curse, because you can't not. It's one of the main ways we express ourselves. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of, especially with my background, my mom, doing Planned Parenthood work, is to have had each of them on purpose when we wanted to. Matters really, really a lot. And to have them know that from birth, that they were born wanted on purpose. Yeah, I could talk about them for a long time. They are fantastic people. I'm so grateful to know and have in my life, and they're just super cool. Was there a specific question about them?
Well, yes. The question about them was, have your kids inspired any of your design /plots/settings?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Burned Over is one of the big things that we're working on right now. And it's specifically because Apocalypse World is an adult game. It's not for kids. And then when our older kids got to be of age that it was appropriate for them, it was okay for them, like, okay, you're literally in college, you can literally play this. Or even later high school, like okay, we're all like 17, 18, 19 years old, we're going to play Apocalypse World. Our youngest was like, I want Apocalypse World 2. And Vincent was like, okay, but I've got to, it's got to be different. So Burned Over is not at all our like kids version, but seeing that such an interest in younger kids, was like, all right, how do we make this for a wider audience? There's a ton of people out there who would love to play Apocalypse World, but are really like, they don't want the language necessarily. They're gonna, so that's okay. We'll do something else for them. Yeah, our kids inspire us all the time, and we inspire them. They're sharp. We are harder on them as mentors than we are on anybody else that we work with, because we don't, and because we expect it of them. It's like the only thing really in their lives that I'm like, okay, you can slack off on your history homework, I don't care, but you are going to have solid game design.
I love that so much. It's like being,
yeah,
you are going to have solid game design.
And I'm a historian, and I work in museums. So me saying, all right, I know this is a ridiculous history assignment. You don't have to do it, but you better make those playbook moves. Yeah.
That's really funny. Oh, by the way, is it the Lumply? Is that the Patreon? Is that the right Patreon to share?
Yeah, Vincent, it's yeah. I think technically, because Patreon is like, it doesn't like to have like a group. It likes to have one person. So yeah,
I just want to make sure it was the right one that I'm sharing.
Yep.
I'm gonna drop that in the chat. But
Vincent's, yeah, and that's where you'll get all of our everything, except for my museum stuff, which is like technically has a Patreon, and it's mostly, whatever. It's not there. Don't worry about it.
Well, if I find it, it'll probably drop it. It will end up being in the full show notes when this is like treated to YouTube or whatever.
Yeah. And then Baker House Band.
Yeah.
The Baker House Band is, let's see, we're on year 11 of having basically every Friday that we can, our house fills up with teenagers from the school and plays games. And they are amazing, and I love them. And it means that there's about 20 teens and young adults that I care deeply for and that I see regularly. Some I don't see as much anymore because they like gone off to college and done other things. But collectively, they're the Baker House Band, and it's, we couldn't do what we do without them. This group of young people who are eager and sharp and funny and full of emotion and full of neurodiversity and learning styles and gender fluidity and on and on and on and on, that have been tolerant of our family and have been kind enough to be part of our family. And they really are. Like there's people that I feel like of anybody in the world that when there's a call of like, hey, we really need your help with our child who's really hurting. Can you help? Yes, without doubt, and that happened to us last February. We're in the middle of the pandemic. Things are looking really terrible. And one of the families contacted said, this separation is really destroying our kids' mental health. Is there any way we can make a bubble? Yeah, for you, yes. It's the hardest part. It's the hardest thing for me to be separated from other people. The hardest thing. I love them. I love you all.
So, is it mostly role-playing games or board games? Like, what games are played?
Mostly role-playing games. Yeah. Mostly role-playing games, but also we play board games. And there was a whole. I mean, we have more boffing equipment than we need. Oh my goodness, so many boffing swords and things like that. Because I teach LARP at the school, and so that's a whole nother piece. Board games, there's a ton of video game playing going on in the house. We have a Baker House Band Minecraft server, which was great when the kids go to college and things, but we can still all play together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. That's all that. And I did a zine a couple years back, Love Letters from the Baker House Band. That was really, really fun because it was inviting all of the kids who participated to write something for the zine. And then we shared out the, profits from the zine Kickstarter. It was really, really cool.
That's awesome.
Very happy.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now I'm just this is just like my curiosity, which is like video games. Like, are there? You said Minecraft. Are there other favorites that get played in your household? That other video games?
Gosh, there's so many video games. I couldn't even I lost track. I loved Unraveled. It was so much fun. I love What Remains of Edith Finch. Oh my goodness, such an amazing game. Is amazing. Yeah. Spiritfarer. Wow. Love Spiritfarer. So good. Borderlands is in real high rotation around here.
Makes sense.
The Last of Us was good. Horizon Zero Dawn was good. What are some other ones? I don't know. There's
I was just curious. I was just wanted to know what games.
People went through a whole Assassin's Creed thing. They went through a whole Dishonored thing. Animal Crossing.
Of course.
Spore gets a lot of play in our house. Oh, goodness,
so I never went back and played Spore much. Like, I should. Maybe I should revisit it at some point.
It is fun. So one of the things about Spore that's great is that you can sort of really play at each stage. Like, I like the cell stage in Spore. I don't know. I just think it's fun. And like the creature stage is fun. But Elliot just recently, we've had Spore forever.
Yeah.
Went back and played through the star, like the space stage. And it was completely different. Had a blast, but like I don't think anybody in the house had ever played that before because we were like cell stage, creature stage, civilization stage, but yeah, it gets on and on. Here, all the kids also do all kinds of digital art and physical art. So Hero Forge has been huge, and just doing character design. They do incredible, a lot of their. Especially Toby's, like world building for work that they're doing in terms of game design, game writing. They draft out characters in Hero Forge, which is really, really cool. That's all the video games I can think of at the moment.
If you like What Remains of Edith Finch, I'm trying to think. No, I might have lost. There was another game I was going to recommend that's sort of along those lines, but I just lost.
Gone Home?
Gone Home is another game that's
that was great.
And then if you like, I don't play horror video games, but the other people who I podcast and stream with do, So they talked a lot about the suicide of Rachel Foster this year. I think it was earlier this year they were playing.
Yeah, that I don't know if the kids have heard of that
Yeah.
one. I I don't play a ton of video games. I mean, I'm around a lot
Right,
when they're
right,
being played.
right.
I really like being a support person on the couch.
So this is the thing that I think that if people aren't parents who have video game playing children, I don't think they get it. Like the conversation we're having, like I'm vibing on because there are a number of games that we play
Yeah,
in my house, which doesn't
yeah,
mean I have played them ever. I've
yeah,
never
yeah,
played them. One of
yep,
the Animal Crossing, for example, you would think
yeah,
I podcast and stream about video games. I've never played Animal Crossing, but I
yeah.
play Animal Crossing all the time on the couch with
Mhm.
as a shared group experience.
Because that's one of the things about this, right? It's a shared experience.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the super cool things about like religion or role-playing games or video games is like something to connect about and share about. And I dig it. Like, so what are you playing? So I'm assuming mostly it's your 10-year-olds that are
So
playing.
actually, believe it or not, I think the biggest video game player in the house is our 5-year-old. So
Really?
yeah, we may have let him play video games too young in life. I don't know. Someone may tell me started too young. He was practically so we got a Switch for them.
Mm-hmm.
Santa. If my
Mm-hmm.
Santa brought a Switch for them, they don't watch this show, so it's probably fine. Santa brought a Switch for them. I want to say not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before. I
2019.
think
Yeah.
so, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know. The last year and a half time is messed up.
Oh my gosh. Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's right. But and like since that happened, that kid, like he has played Super Mario Galaxy. That's the right one, I think.
Hmm.
Through completely in its totality so many times, like
Yeah, because it's fun.
numerous times, like he just
Yeah.
like I think that kid has that game memorized on every level. So I would say he's now my having said that, my middlest child, my middle 10-year-old, because they're 10 but one is older, the
Yeah.
middle 10-year-old does also love video games and plays a lot of games. And I'm trying to think of what they're really into right now. They're into something that I haven't actually spent much time with them on. That's it's like similar to. It's got a similar vibe. I'm not gonna remember the name of it. It's got like a similar vibe to Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing was like a launching pad
Hmm.
for them to play similar games in that style, where like
Sure. Yeah.
where you're like being able to adapt your own space and like put this chair here and like they love
Yeah.
being able to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that and also interact with NPCs and stuff like that. The one
Yeah.
that they're playing, you can like I think you can like rename NPCs that you meet, and maybe Animal Crossing you can do that too. I don't remember.
No.
But you can like rename, so they like, and you can. I think you can even change the way they look. So like they
Mm.
can like they love that. They will play. Are you familiar with like the Mii's in like the Switch and the Wii?
Yeah. Yeah.
They would sit, and I would swear to you, they would spend, if they were allowed to, they would spend hours sitting on the couch
Oh,
just designing
don't get them
Mii's.
started on pit crews then.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
pit crew, they will be done.
Really? Is it all like a
Oh my
lot of like
gosh. Because it's basically it's paper dolls online, right?
right?
And you can have like here's a pit crew of uh make a little terrarium and here's like 20 different little things and 20 different little skies and 20 different little animals. Yeah, it can be a whole thing.
But see, they would probably love that.
They'd love it. They would love it.
It's
Yeah,
just an engine, like a different engine for doing, as you said, paper dolls. Really, it's the
yeah,
same kind of
yeah,
play, right?
definitely.
That's actually a question I thought about when you were talking about role playing games so early, like when you're talking about being
Hmm.
7. I
Yeah.
I thought of a question I've not asked anyone before in the show, but like what pre role playing? So and it's so hard because 7's so young. But I was wondering, like, what kind of do you even remember? But do you remember what kinds of like imaginary play was there like a imaginary play that you remember liking before you found role playing games? Like, do you have? I don't even know if you
Sure.
might not even remember
Oh
them.
my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I I had a huge background of myths from all kinds of different cultures to draw from. I specifically had Swedish Swedish folklore, Northeast Woodlands indigenous folklore that we could find in the 70s, which was not as much as we can find now, thank goodness, but there's that. Greek and Egyptian and Norse, because they were just everywhere. The Rainbow Fairy books were huge in the 70s, so we read tons of that. The first time I heard the entirety of Lord of the Rings read aloud was the winter that I was 6. My mom read aloud all the time, like every night. She would read for an hour, read aloud for an hour to us kids. And so all of our pretend play was just riffing off that, really, of like, pick whatever myth system and myth that we wanted to act out. And, we wrote plays and we performed plays. And so here's the thing, the way back history of Meg, I learned to crawl and talk in a Shakespearean dinner theater that my father was the lighting and electrician for and had small parts in, and my mother did costume design and did some of the cooking for, and all the staff, all the staff and actors lived on site in a 52 bedroom Victorian, not Victorian, Tudor, 52 bedroom Tudor style resort hotel that had been built in the mid 1800s. And then the theater director bought it for real cheap on the tax market, because the upkeep on that is extreme. So anyway, that's where I learned to walk and talk and crawl, is in, like, steeped in, you do not break character Shakespearean dinner theater. And so I can't not.
Yeah.
From the time I was tiny.
Yeah.
So I have that. And then I have like all these myth structures and all of this being, read aloud to. And then I had, like, I grew up outdoors. Like, I don't really, like, I mean, I remember kind of being inside for 2nd and 3rd grade, but, in terms of, like, I there was a school that I went to, but I just really, outdoors was there where I was at. So it was just constantly making up games with my sister, constantly, endlessly making up stories.
I was thinking about this a little bit earlier today because I was listening to something that was talking about this kind of thing, but I was thinking about, like, remembering what life was like when we grew up without the internet.
Yeah.
And, like, that's, like, what you're describing is similar to, like, what I remember my childhood being like as far as play. And wow, it's so different than now.
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing how different it is. That's why I said maybe I shouldn't have let my kids play video games as young as they do. I don't know. I truly don't know.
It's tough, right? And that's the thing, is parents, we do the best we can with the information we have in the moment at hand. And that's all we can do. Information and resources. Best we can with the information and resources at hand in the moment that is. That's all we can do.
Yeah.
That's it. Sometimes it's going to be amazing and it's going to be our highest ideals of parenting and we're going to feel super good about everything. Most of the time it's kind of be like, oh, they're okay. They're alive and they seem to be happy. It's all right. Sometimes it's going to be horrible. And, like, if everyone has a safe place to sleep and they are not hungry and they know that they are loved, even if they are sad and mad and angry at their parent right now, or they feel like their parent is sad and mad and angry with them, then that's fine. That's the best we can do. And we'll give it a better shot tomorrow. But one of the things as a parent that I think is really tough is that piece of not knowing, right? You won't know for another 10 years if letting your youngest kid play video games this early may have had a detrimental effect. And by then, there's no way you'll be able to ever go back down that other road.
Yeah.
I have the same with our kids. We didn't have a TV when our oldest was really young. We didn't have a TV until our 2005. We had a TV in 2005. 2007, my grandparents died and I cleaned out their house. And before that, we didn't have a television. When our oldest was born in 96 and our second was born in 2000. And it was a change. I'm never going to be able to go back and take the alternate path where we don't have that. And like my second and third kids grow up without TV.
Yeah.
And grow up without screens. And now, do I think there's too many screens? Yes. Desperately, horribly. Do I also think that it's amazing that we've been able to translate to being online when the pandemic hit? I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for the options that my kids have to connect with people during this pandemic. And I'm very grateful for the conversations that they can have with each other and the camaraderie and love and support they have for each other, built on shared time playing video games together. So yeah, it's a tough thing. Solidarity with you, my friend and fellow parent.
Exactly. Well, it's like like you were talking about before with the Minecraft server, right? Like the technology allows the community. It's when it serves the community, right? Like, you're talking about how important it was to have that community connection. And when they go to college, the Minecraft server allows the relationships to continue. So I think, the technology can serve the rest, but I mean, that's the order it has to be in, right?
Yeah. Well, and the question is, that's one of the huge questions that I'm talking about with other friends who have college age kids. And I know we're like way over time now.
Oh no, we're good. We got 7 minutes till the next show on our network starts. And it's not that that's like super pressing, but we're good.
Cool. That's great. All right, we're in a good place.
We're good. Yeah.
Friends of mine who are in college, like young friends of mine who went to college, one of the challenges that they had was that they remained so connected to their home group. When I went to college, and a lot of folks that I know of that went to college, like we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have, we maybe had a dial-up BBS in the library, but we certainly didn't have a computer in our home, our dorm room. And so we had to reach out and find each other and like make connections and find the new, find the new group that you were going to hang out with. And some of my young friends have struggled mightily in college, even before the pandemic, because their phones and the internet allows them to just stay connected to their friends at home and not venture out and not even recognize, like, so I'm talking with one of them and they're like, oh, that sounds like you've got some good friends there. Like, and they don't even recognize it, that these people that they're like going to anime movie night and then the movie ended early. So a bunch of them were going to go get pizza. And I'm like, well, why didn't you go with them? They're missing some of those bits. And that's one of the things that I feel really intensely about in role playing, and like the way it can help scaffold connection skills and like how to at least pretend to be a different person, and that'll get you to be that more outgoing person or whatever. The importance there, and learning how to experiment with being in new situations and new things, because that's the piece that I think is most challenging in the screen thing, is like, we've got to get over our timidity to connect with each other again. Right. And how do we connect?
Mm-hmm. And I worry about that a little bit with my 5-year-old, given his exact age going through the pandemic, but he's in the classroom. He's going to kindergarten. Of course, now the other fear, of course, is not vaccinated, so it has its own fears. But I'm glad he's like interacting with children, like other kids, his peers. He's having those out of the house experiences. Like, I'm just very grateful, because I was worried about that, getting over that timidity, kind of getting out into the world.
It's huge. It's huge. And like, every kid is different. Every person is different. Like our oldest kid, we intentionally rented Pokemon videos from the library because all the other kindergartners were talking about Pokemon, and our oldest was like, I don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. We have to give you the cultural touchstones to make connections with your peers. If everybody on the planet is talking about Dune, it would be nice if you don't have to like it and you don't have to watch it, but you see a trailer so you know what they're talking about.
But Dune is good.
It is good, right?
Good. Yeah, it's
it was
really
good. It was. We had such a fun time joking in the house because, like, I think Faye read it, but nobody else in the house has read Dune, and I saw the first one in 1984 when it came out, and so it was neat to go into it with like eyes open, like okay, let's try to see this through my kids' eyes, who have no idea, except for our oldest read it, and our second bounced right off the first page. Is like, the what? Boom, not interested at all. And so it was really fun. It was fun. I loved the part where, and Rob Bowles said this in Twitter that I really appreciated. It conveyed the horror of a holy war in one's name. And how horrifying. Like, I so resonated with that scene. Like, I don't ever want anyone ever to do violence in my name. Ever.
And I have not read the book either, and my wife is reading it now and said that scene is prolonged even in the book. Like, that goes on even more into that. But I do think I should not have brought up Dune right before the end of the show. But it's no, it's not your fault. It's fine. Because I want to talk about Dune. But so we won't too long. But I did also think one of the things I loved, because I saw it twice actually, because my co-founder of All Ports Open, Josh, and I saw it together opening night, and then my wife went and saw it with me later because she's reading it, and I just thoroughly loved it. But I thought it conveyed like how the rise of a religious figure and what that would look like really well, and like in a really profound and powerful way. So like to say that, the idea of the horrors then of like having a religious war, like in your name, what that be like is part of that, it's part of that. But like, just like, it just to me, such a good job of showing like, this is what it looks like when this religious figure rises. Right. And all the myths being made around him. And yet he's also just a person. Like, he's just still a guy. Like, he's just Paul.
That's the thing, right? And that's the thing that I feel like is at the heart of so much of this, is like, there's, people show up every so often, every millennia or something. People show up who are like, I figured out a couple things about how we can be better to each other. And it makes for a nicer life. And then like all of this stuff gets packed on and they become these, huge religious figures. And it's just like, I feel so sorry for them sometimes. Like, all you were trying to do is help out. And instead everybody's like, that's not what they would have wanted. I'm like, oh, anyway. It's a whole nother thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so, man, as much as I don't want to end, here we are at the end. Meg, thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks you want to tell people where they can like find you out there on the digital space if they have screens?
Easiest place is Night Sky Games on Twitter. I'm there all the time. I am also in the Lumply Patreon with Vincent and with our kids. Other digital places that you can find me, that's probably the best. That really does it. I do host a Discord server for Apocalypse World and a Discord server for Under Hollow Hills, and that trucks along. If you're into the cultural phenomenon known as Blaseball, I'm there also. I'm a Blaseball moderator on Main Chord, and that's good. I'm Keeper Bees there. But yeah, I think that's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was really fun. I would do this again, and I'm going to hold you to that interview of you at your year anniversary.
It's a deal.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's next April, so you've got 6 months.
Awesome. I'll start assembling questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask Meg to hang out in my little digital green room, aka Zoom here. But I'm going to take a moment with all of you folks out there. Oh no. Hold on. Is this still streaming? Yes, I think it is still streaming. It looked like I had a network error for a second, but I think we're good. Okay, just long enough to wrap the show up right here at the end. Okay, so like I said, huge thanks again to Meg Baker for being on the show and joining us. Please don't forget to hit the follow button here on That Gamer Priest, or you could consider subscribing to the channel. If you only caught part of tonight's show, you'll be able to watch it on demand for a brief time here on Twitch, but you can also head over to allportsopen.com to watch every episode of the show afterward, or find All Ports Open Network on YouTube. Check out all of the great shows on our network. Don't leave. Stick around, folks, because we're about to raid into the next show on our network, which is a play test of a horror role-playing game. So you're going to want to check that out. So stick around and check it out, because it's a perfect time of year for it. It's a like a spooky story generator, basically. It's a cool game. So huge thanks to Joshua Wise, who is my APON co-founder, for the artwork on the stream, for the overlay, and everything he does for our network. Thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on the show. I am That Gamer Priest, Ben. Come back to same bat time, same bat channel next week, because Epadiah Ravishal is going to be my guest next week on the show. Enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours, my friends. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere, because I'm going to figure out how to raid. It's time to check out the playtest, A Long Night's Ride into Darkness. So don't move a muscle, because I gotta figure out the raid. So we're raiding in just a few moments here, folks. Here we go.